So this seems a really good time to make this point. This whole course, as I said right from the start, is about theatrical pickpocketing. You want to be seen. You want people to know who you are and what you're doing and why. It's a bit like the distinction between a gambler and a magician. A magician wants you to know that, he's using techniques. He wants you to realize that he is behind the magic. He doesn't necessarily want you to know how it's done or even when it's done, but he does want you to know that he did it. Whereas a gambler doesn't want you to even suspect foul play. He doesn't want you to have any idea that he's even thinking of doing something, let alone doing it. Which is interestingly, I think, the distinction between, or one of the distinctions between a theatrical pickpocket and a street thief. The thief on the street doesn't want you to know that you've lost anything, ideally. Or certainly they don't want to be recognized as being the cause of it. Even when you realize something was stolen, they don't want you to have any recognition of who the person was who stole it from you. That's why street thieves tend not to want to have eye contact with you. They tend not to want to interact with you directly. You're more likely to have a wallet stolen on the tube because it's so crowded, and they can just literally take it out and get off the tube and run. Sometimes you have teams of people that work together, but again, part of the dynamic of that team is so that nobody's really that recognizable or memorable. The person whose job it is to block you in, you might know and recognize who they are, but they have nothing to do with the actual moment of theft. So it's virtually impossible for you to pin anything on them. And they certainly don't have, any of the product that they've stolen. So I think it's important to realize that when we are talking about theatrical pickpocketing, it's perfectly acceptable for the person to be aware of you going into their pocket. That little demonstration I did of proximity, Daniele was fully aware, as would, the mark in a show, that my hand went into his pocket, that I was particularly, asking what he had in there or searching the pocket. But it doesn't matter that they feel that or know it's happening, as long as their attention is moved and bounced in other directions. So that by the time I reveal that I have their phone, they're not able to backtrack to the moment it happened. And even if they could backtrack, it wouldn't matter because I've still got it. And that's the difference between pickpocketing and magic, that actually this isn't a magic trick. I am doing, I'm doing what it says on the tin. I'm stealing stuff off you, and my job is to do it in such a way that you don't know when it happens. You know that it's going to happen. You know that it has happened, maybe, but you don't know when or how, in the sense of the exact timing. You're still caught out on it. I've often felt that pickpocketing has a parallel to one of my favorite elements of magic, which is card under glass. The idea of, I'm going to get your signed card to go back under your drink. Now, you know what I'm going to do. I've told you I'm going to do it. I've done it several times already. But still, that moment that you look down and your card's back there and you think, oh, he's caught me again. Yeah, of course I know when he did it. It was a few moments ago when he did this or he asked this question. It's the only logical place that it could have happened. But it doesn't make it any less amazing or magical. There are different kinds of magic tricks, some of them which are designed to be challenges or designed to look like puzzles, where you set the whole premise up at the beginning, and some things that are designed to be utterly invisible from start to finish. Well, pickpocketing can be invisible. You can have moments where, if you're doing a magic trick, that is your cover for stealing somebody's watch, by the time you reveal that you're wearing that person's watch, or it's in the box over there, or the waitress brings it and it's wrapped around the bottle of wine, or however you reveal it, they might not know until that second that that's what you were doing. But there are other occasions where it's perfectly acceptable to just openly place your hand in somebody's pocket and look at an item. The key here is to make sure that the moment it comes out, their attention is utterly absorbed somewhere else. Yeah. And I think there is this misnomer in pickpocketing, or when people learn pickpocketing, that they expect to learn this light-fingered art where you could be walking down the street with somebody and you could just brush past them and take their wallet out and they would be none the wiser. But actually, there's a little bit more going on than that. As a theatrical pickpocket, you want people to know what you're doing. You want to be there. You want it to be entertaining and engaging. The real key is covering the moment of the steal, focusing more on the manipulation of their attention than on the physical act itself. Okay, it's all about misdirection, all about attention management, all about their perception of what is happening. And the actual technique, the actual physical side of it, as far as I'm concerned, 20% maybe of the whole thing. 80% is all about the attention, 20% is about the technique. That's why there are some great pickpockets out there whose technique is to literally shove their hand in, grab what they can, and pull it back out again. But what they have on their side is an amazing ability to control or direct your attention. And at that point, they don't need to be light-fingered. Let me give you an example right now. Until I mention this, the chances are none of you are aware of the sensation of your underpants rubbing against your bum. But now I've mentioned it, you're probably all aware of that sensation. But it's a really obvious one. I mean, this is a sensitive area of the human body, yet you can go all day without really noticing your clothing. You've got clothes that are constantly rubbing against your body, yet no matter how lightly I touch the hairs on my arm, I can feel it. I mean, it is impossible for me not to sense it. Yet I go hour after hour with no awareness of the socks on my feet, or the shoes that I'm in, or the clothes on my back. Because if my attention is somewhere else, the brain has a brilliant way of just blurring that stuff to nothing. And that's what you've got to think about. You don't have to hide everything that you're doing. You just have to deceive the mind long enough so it simply can't perceive that it's happening. A while ago at one of the live trainings, somebody during the middle of the training took me to one side and said, look, I get everything that you're doing, but here in this training environment, we're all being compliant. We know what you're doing. We're playing along. We're allowing it to happen. It's a really, it's an odd environment. This isn't a real life situation. Surely in the real life, I'd feel this. I'd recognize it. None of this would work on me. So I said, I understand what you mean. So basically, if I'm stood here, if I'm touching you here, you're aware of that, aren't you? Yeah. And if I move around here and I put my hand in here, you're aware of that as well, aren't you? He said, yeah. He says, in his mind, this was proving the point. No matter what I did, he knew I was doing it. What he didn't realize was that I was directing his attention as I did these things. And whatever hand I was using to, go into one pocket without him being aware, the other hand was going into another. And because he was so fixated on catching me out, if you like, of saying, well, of course I can feel you're doing that. Of course I can feel you're doing this. He left himself wide open and vulnerable to another steal, which actually is a good moment for me to say this. When you're out learning, developing these skills as a pickpocket, particularly when you go out and begin to perform as a pickpocket, be careful that you don't let yourself become vulnerable to people stealing off you. There is nothing that the punters out there like more than getting one over on the performer. If you're a magician, they try and get one over on you. No more so than when you're a pickpocket. If you're doing close-up pickpocketing in particular, you will always have somebody sat behind you, sat somewhere around walking past, that thinks, wouldn't it be funny if I could steal something off the pickpocket while he's picking somebody else's pocket? And the answer is, they can, if you allow yourself to be vulnerable to that. All right? Don't fall for the same stuff that you're selling to other people, as it were. Yeah. Be aware of your personal space, your environment, and realize that the more focused you become, the less aware of the surroundings you are. These are exactly the techniques you're using to steal from other people. Don't allow those techniques to be used against you.